in Sycamore 1, approaching drop site. Wind speed nominal, commencing drop. Parachutes deployed, landing. See you all in good time. Hello everybody, this is the first log here from Sycamore 1, that is our lander, and we've just dropped down quite successfully, I dare say, in the vast icy wilderness of the West Antarctic. So, I am I'm Custodian Prime. I'm the first person that has to sit down and make sure that everything is put in place, and Sycamore 1 is our landing here. We decided to use landers over an actual ground kind of trek because, well, the ground around here is not necessarily reliably good for anything with treads. Somewhere around here, or maybe it might be the one with the sea at this point, is an actual huge vehicle that they built to try and just traverse the Arctic, and it didn't work very well. The thing was basically built like a mobile lab. It was gorgeous. But I've got my solar panel up, I've done a little bit of preliminary digging, not very much. And today we just need to get the start of our new micronation set up. So, new Millennia starts with Sycamore 1. This is going to be pretty wild, it has to say. Unfortunately, it is very cold around here, so I do have a few kind of amenities here. We've got a survival kit inside Sycamore 1, we've got basic power, and I am presently decked out in the finest Arctic survival suit that we could manufacture on a budget with the lowest bidder. And it should keep me warm as long as it has power. It is not going to, like, allow me to survive just generally, but it's got a nice little heating element inside of it. It's got a pretty decent climate control, so we had to consult parts of the furry community for parts of this. And it also actually has, like, USB ports, so I can plug in some particular power tools. So hopefully it allows me to get along quite nicely here. But for the moment, we do not have very much going on. Fair bit of interesting tech in here. I don't understand all of it, necessarily. We're gonna have to get to grips with this over time, but I'm just gonna try laying down a very preliminary basis with it that just has some power, and we'll see where we get to from there. So, and log 1. Okay, a little bit of mining early on. There's a few different rock formations around here that we can actually make some decent use of. Our survival kit in Sycamore 1 is currently converting that into its base materials. We're trying to produce some steel plates. That's not necessarily going directly to plan, but we are trying nonetheless. And we really want to get a more dedicated system going for this. There is a number of requirements for the micronation of New Millennia before we can actually start to get all of our settlers in. We figured more or less that sending just one person at a time was gonna be the most resource-light, let's say, kind of approach, so hence the custodian arrives first. So I'm just gonna set up a tower here on the nearest convenient peak. And on that, we will try to place a brand new, windmill, essentially. We're going to be tilting in a windmill today, everybody. And hopefully we don't get a really rough night, because it's going to be very unpleasant to get through all of the night with just Sycamore 1 and my ASS, because yeah, it gets pretty freaking cold here in West Antarctica. I don't suppose I needed to tell anybody that, but yeah, it does. It really does. Now, fortunately, my ASS is equipped with some degree of propulsion. It doesn't have very much in the way of fuel or oomph, for the lack of a better term, but it should be enough to allow me to construct this without having to climb up and down a whole ton. Just have to be a little bit careful on the velocity, because otherwise it is going to hurt quite heavily. Anyways, continuing on with the builds. Okay, so we are making a start here. It's not the prettiest tower in the world, or I suppose for the purposes of us it certainly is, but we nonetheless have erected the basics of our wind power, and hopefully that will mean that I don't have to worry too much about the solar here. Now, the solar is a good supply. It is definitely good and useful, but it only works during the day, and here, way above, well, way below, in fact, the Arctic Circle, we're gonna have a lot of trouble with light, especially over the seasons. Seasons in Antarctica, you have really, really, really long nights, so we don't really want to rely on solar. Wind is more reliable, but we do also have to bear in mind that we also get storms around here, so that's something we do have to keep in mind. And for just right now, I am only focused on getting this up and running. It's not powering anything right now. It will be powering our refinery, initially. But for right now, we just need this to be working. So, the requirements... Oof. Okay, thankfully, I am actually sufficiently light that this booster can actually handle moving me around. It's meant for the less physically capable of our settlers, but it's actually capable of moving me around just entirely by itself, which is pretty nice, actually, right now. It just needs to have hydrogen, and we are burning ice to make oxygen and hydrogen. Not a huge need for the oxygen right now, although it is helpful in our suit containers, but for the most part, we're actually doing pretty okay here. Okay, that gets us that construction components, or some of them at the very least. Let's shift the queue, and then it should just gradually make them as it needs. Okay. Yeah, the survival kit is actually a pretty nifty piece of tech. We more or less took a whole bunch of cues from like 3D printing. We just boil materials down essentially to a more or less thread-based kind of situation, and then we just loop them together. It's actually quite neat. I could have used one of these back in Middlesbrough, but for right now, we ain't in Middlesbrough anymore, Toto. Alright, that should be the last of the materials I need for this. Just dump the excess stone. And hopefully this should be all that I need to now weld together this day one, essentially, power supply. So we've currently got about 20... Easy there, easy. We've currently got about 27 settlers registered, and we're going to need to get habitats for all of them before they all start turning up. And there's a few requirements we have jotted down. We passed leaflets around and such, and established what everybody would need before they'd be able to get here. So we're going to need power, which we're expecting mostly wind, some solar. We might need... If we find some uranium around here, we're probably going to have an international incident. So we ideally don't want to be going nuclear, at least using supplies from here. We've also got shelter, that's an obvious one. We need to allow for minimal environmental exposure, and then we've also got medical facilities necessary. We need to get comms going, transport, resource acquisition, mining, in short, and we also need to do manufacturing. Now, we're probably going to want central for large-scale production, so we got a big group of assemblers, not unlike a big industrial version of our survival kit over there, and then we're going to want some also local ones, so things more like the survival kit itself for individual projects inside of the habitation. But for right now, I need to get a refinery going, because we can't rely on the purely on the survival kit for very long. It's not meant for long-term kind of projects. So, end log for now, see you in a moment. One of the, perhaps slightly odd choices of equipment, I guess, for this whole expedition is that I do actually have a gun. Now, I don't have very much in the way of bullets, but don't tell anybody that. We're not expecting hostilities around here. There are polar bears in here, but ideally we don't want to do any of this involving violence. Ideally we want to be, a pragmatic, I guess, at best, kind of like pacifist kind of situation. But there's the possibility of hostilities. Somebody might just try and somebody international might pick a fight with us, but also I think we're technically in the territory of the West Antarcticans, so we probably ideally want to avoid them, but you never know. You never know. We may have to deal with them one way or the other. So it's mostly a bear hunting kind of precaution, but if anybody tries to step to me, then well, I have the authorization, I guess. And if you pick a fight in the middle of the West Antarctic, well, that's your own fault. And I believe that the sun is setting presently, so this will be Sycamore 1 signing off for the time being. Catch you in the next vlog.